Hello, hello, and good evening. Go ahead and eat. I don't need anybody hangry here for the Q&A session. And I clearly ate. No, this is my this is my 7-month baby bump, and thank you. Thank you very much. If I'm tempted to kick off the heels, there's a podium to hide that. Yes, this is the Krauss house's first boy, so we have 3 little girls at home, and that's why the topic of this speech is very near and dear to my heart. Because I think something that the pro-life movement does better than the rest of the Christian movement or the conservative movement in a lot of ways is actually empower women. And all of our children have S names. We don't share their faces or names publicly. I can tell you off camera later because they're quite adorable names. And all of our children have S names, and every single day the mantra is, what are you going to be today? And they know that it's to be strong, sweet, and smart. Once a leftist feminist got mad at me for using the word sweet, and I'm like, haha, that just shows you don't understand the dictionary definition of the word, because there's a lot of strength and smartness into being sweet in the right moments at the right time. Anyway, and so every day we go through those 3 words and the dictionary definitions of them, because we believe that the definition of words matter in the Krauss house, and discuss what that means. And it's interesting that in society today, people don't like the meanings of words, and they don't, I think, necessarily like or support women that are strong, sweet, and smart. And to the majority of culture, to them, it is stronger or smarter for a woman not to be a mother, for a woman to not be nurturing, for a woman to not be compassionate. A few years ago, I gave a speech about how I was somewhat envious of the Yes All Women crowd. The Women's March, Hollywood starlets, and corporations who were all loudly proclaiming their support of women everywhere. But now it's even more abundantly clear to me than it was then that their so-called support wasn't just politically aligned, but that they are, and always have been, hypocrites who said that they supported women, but whose actions were completely opposite of that. They were yes, all women, but probably most of the women in this room. Yes, all women, but the gun-toting ones. Yes, all women, but the pro-First Amendment ones. Yes, all women, but the stay-at-home moms. Yes, all women, but the homeschool ones, right? Yes, all women, but the nuns. Yes, all women, but the biological ones. And of course, yes, all women, but the pro-life ones. And we've seen for decades the lengths that the pro-abortion movement will go to try to convince people that the pro-life movement are anti-women. They spread lies about being unable to obtain medication that helps with PMS. They try to say that a DNC is illegal in states like Tennessee. They say that women's lives are over because now they have to travel across state lines to obtain an abortion. The horror in their minds, right? In fact, they've created more charities to aid women in traveling to abortion-friendly states, like where I reside in California, than they have to aiding women in having and supporting those children that are already alive. And we've seen the anti-life rhetoric and lies ramp up since last year's Dobbs decision. Just this week even today, it's like every single news podcast or paper headline I saw had to do with the judicial battle that's currently happening over the abortion pill. And nearly every front page of major newspapers, whether it was the Washington Post to local Pennsylvania ones, were espousing irrational fears over the current battle regarding that pill that's happening in the courts. NPR highlighted the alleged woes of abortion clinics and doctors who are confused about the judicial rulings regarding mifepristone. They went on to highlight how stressful this is for women. Heaven forbid that they actually discuss the stressors that these drugs are doing to women's bodies, let alone the babies in the womb. The New York Times and other mainstream outlets are already encouraging a democratically controlled 2025 Congress, because they're rooting for more democratic control in 2025, to make the abortion pill legal, hence helping their cause in the courts. It's kind of funny to see mainstream media actually figure out how the branches of government work after trying to use the Supreme Court and the Ninth Circuit for years to do their dirty work for them. The anti-life movement is so worried about this argument that they're actively encouraging women to ignore laws regarding abortions in their states. This is from the New York Times. Quote, "The shipping of pills is an important issue because the practice can allow people to circumvent state restrictions." So, not really sure how telling women to break the law while putting their own medical well-being at risk so they can kill a baby in utero is pro-women. And as we all know, I'm sure most of you do, the FDA used COVID and labeled pregnancy an epidemic. It's hilarious. I mean, you don't get it from being on an airplane with sick people. When I get on a plane tomorrow, no one else around me is going to get pregnant. But the FDA labeled it an epidemic in order to fast track shipping of that abortion pill, in order to circumvent the legislatures, right? And circumventing appropriate oversight, which is what the lawsuits are alleging, by the way, and they have the proof to back it up. It circumvents the oversight that would require women to obtain the pills from a doctor or other medical professional and under the supervision of a medical professional because of the risks of such a drug. Since the FDA did this, nearly 30 women have died and hundreds have needed hospitalization and close to 1,000 have needed blood transfusions. Super pro-women.
Can you give those stats again? I'm sorry.
Since the FDA, during COVID, circumvented the rules making mifepristone and the abortion drug available via the mail, it's able to be obtained without a script from a doctor and without the supervision of a medical professional. Nearly 30 women have died, hundreds have needed hospitalization due to complications, and nearly 1,000 have needed blood transfusions. Most of those stats came from Live Action, or a progressive anti-abortion group that you can find on Instagram. They're some of my favorites. Now we have judges on both sides giving contrary and confusing rulings, telling the FDA not to restrict in certain states, but yes, it is restricted otherwise. And the Biden Justice Department is so pro-women that they are more concerned with asking the Supreme Court to review these cases than they are willing to acknowledge and investigate the murder of 3 children, 2 women, and a minority at a Christian school in Nashville as a hate crime. The Justice Department. Why do they need to get involved in this? And one of my favorite words that Ben Shapiro taught me is verklempt. And the media is currently verklempt over Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signing, quote, the most restrictive anti-abortion law in the country. He did so at 12:03 a.m. last night. The Washington Post lamented, quote, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed a Republican bill late Thursday banning abortion after 6 weeks of pregnancy, cutting off critical access point for abortion care. I asked this on Twitter and Instagram today. Nobody could give me an answer. Pray tell, what the heck is abortion care? They also totally ignored the carve-outs that the Republican legislators and Ron DeSantis allowed that give exceptions of abortion for sex trafficking victims, incest, rape, and even fetal deformities. In my opinion, I'm so pro-life, I don't think that that's extreme enough. I think those carve-outs are still an atrocity. Shouldn't cover up one tragedy with another. But the left used to say, oh, used to make the, oh, what about rape and incest argument? And they got their rape and incest argument in this law, but they're still using it to attack pro-lifers. And unfortunately, in our society, the message to young women and girls that they are incapable of properly protecting themselves, of selecting a real man who would help protect and provide for them, or that they are not enough should they find themselves pregnant at an unfortunate time in their lives, starts very, very young. There are teen and tween shows on television that highlight this plight. And America's first celebrity president, Barack Obama, once said that he wouldn't want his daughter's dreams destroyed if they were to be, quote, punished with a baby. It's a really horrible and I think disgusting thing for a father to say, to think, let alone say. And the average age that doctors recommend birth control in this country is around 14. And by 16, most of the women that are currently on birth control, or even those who have been wizened up and gotten off of it, had already started at 16 before they could get their driver's license. And I blame not just culture, but the medical community for this. Because they say, it can help with cramps and headaches and PMS and low back pain and, oh, that unfortunate acne that you would hate to have for 8th grade prom. Without informing parents or young girls of the risks. Just some of the risks of hormonal birth control. Liver issues, infertility, increase of suicidality, blood clots, heart failure, stroke, weight gain, bloating, hormonal imbalance and mental health issues, fatigue, anxiety, depression, and foggy brain. Talk about a war on girls. And of course, I'm sure many of you are also aware of the horrific risks of abortion too. Many of the same ones as hormonal birth control, along with risk of pelvic infection, cervical damage or infection, UTI, long-term damage to the uterus, excessive bleeding, blood clots, cut or torn uterus and cervix, which is unfixable, by the way, perforation of the uterine wall, as well as a much more than birth control, like a double-digit increase of suicidality, depression, anxiety, and future infertility. And I think that if we're really pro-women, and if the anti-life crowd is truly pro-woman, they should be making sure that women are given complete informed consent. They should have nothing to hide. If it truly is a woman's choice, why are we not presenting her with all of the facts? These aren't emotional. These are not anecdotal. These are scientific, medical, and proven over decades of time. We need to encourage women in our society that their value isn't being childless and acting like hormonal adolescent males. And the ones who consistently fight to protect born children seem to me to be the same ones who fight to protect the unborn children too. Most, and it's not by a small margin, by the way, and Tori Hope Peterson, who's a fellow YAF speaker, mentioned this last year, and I did some research into it, talked about as a foster kid how most foster and adoptive parents in the country, and it's something like over 70% of them, so it's not a small margin, it's a very large one, identify as Christian or pro-life conservatives. And an argument that I often hear from elites and people that tweet me on social media is that the pro-life movement, you guys don't care. You don't care. Once the baby's born, look at how awful the world is. You don't care. But that's clearly not true. There's zero data to support that so-called argument that they like to make. We can stack it up with all of the other lies that they tell women. Because in addition to pro-life Christians being the major group of people who are adoptive and foster parents, There are more crisis pregnancy centers and women's charities in the United States operated by pro-lifers than there are on the pro-abortion side. Now, I'm kind of odd. I'm a geriatric pregnancy. I like to joke that I'm a grandma millennial. I'm 37 years old. But since I was 18, I've lived in all of my adult life in liberal meccas, like New York City and Los Angeles, where hookup culture and promiscuous lifestyle isn't just normalized, it's encouraged. And I personally don't think it's puritanical or even overtly Christian of me to claim that hookup culture has been perpetuated not only by culture, but of course the medical community as well. Once again, why are we pushing hormonal birth control pills on 14-year-olds? But it's not a religious argument to say that this is a negative thing for the next generation, but specifically girls. Secular and medical studies done show that there are so many negative side effects to hookup culture and the damage of the sexual revolution, and that of participating in promiscuous lifestyle has on men and their psyche and their sexuality and their lack of future success, but even more so on women. And if women mattered, the left would empower us to keep those children, to be more sparing in the partners that we choose, to lay out, once again, those facts and those true choices to young women across the country. If we mattered, they would empower us to conquer the world while raising the next generation. Rihanna, of course, announced her second pregnancy. I think Irish twin, by the way, because she had her baby like last May. I was like, oh, good for her showing that post-baby bod. It's really hard to get rid of that tummy. And I was like, oh, wait, she's pregnant. That's amazing. And she, in interviews leading up to the Super Bowl, you know, all the gossip sites went back and were like, oh, was she giving hints? And she was. Leading up to the Super Bowl, she gave tons of hints about being pregnant. And in one of the interviews that she did with an NFL spokesperson, they asked her, well, how do you feel? Like, it's so soon after your baby. Are you sure you're ready for a Super Bowl halftime show? And honestly, my sinner side would have come out because I probably would have flipped the interviewer the bird and been like, who are you to like say what I can and cannot do just because I had a baby? Like, screw you. And Rihanna said in a much more eloquent way, she was like, this is the best time for me to do a Super Bowl halftime show. My son is the reason I'm doing the Super Bowl halftime show. Because since becoming a mother, my purpose and my creativity and my drive and my work ethic is so much more than it ever was before. Awesome. I love it when people that disagree with us politically make the pro-life argument for us. Senator J.D. Vance put forward a plan to try to make birth free in the country. And instead of addressing the incredibly disturbing massive disparities in women's labor and delivery experiences in the country, which we're a first world nation, but we have the highest infant and mother mortality rate, which is horrible, one of the highest, which, by the way, negatively affects women in rural, poor areas and black women in the country. Instead of leftists saying, hey, you know what, J.D. Vance, we should make medical care for women better. That's a bipartisan issue we should all get behind. No. They, of course, made it a real-life Handmaid's Tale situation. If the anti-life movement really cared for women, they'd pay for maternity leave and incentivize and support the best daycares and childcare options possible. But instead, we see time and time again where they limit and restrict options to schools and early childhood care. Years ago, almost 10 years ago now, I think, the District of Columbia changed a rule that said that daycare workers had to have a bachelor's degree in early childhood education. So your mom and pop homes that were able to have a little preschool or a daycare center, like many of my friends participate in Los Angeles, They drop their kids off and go to work and pick them up on the way home, usually from 2 to 5 years old. And heck, I love it when 65, 70-year-old grandma watches my kids. It's like they're more behaved. I come back to a clean house. Like, it's amazing. And they're more affordable than the starving college kids. Sorry, starving college kids. But it's the free market. But not in DC. No. The government decided it would be best if it was only someone that had a bachelor's degree in early childhood education. And it really hurt working moms. Because not only was the Beltway one of the most expensive places to live, it was like at the time, behind New York City, the most expensive place to have childcare in the country. It hurt a major of the minority-owned daycare centers and of elderly women who had found a second career path. Of course, in addition to massively increasing childcare costs. Because when you have a bachelor's degree to pay off, you charge a little more, don't you? But no. The anti-life movement wanted to push for more expensive government-regulated childcare. And of course, they love to keep children in schools that are determined and dictated only by the zip code that their parents can't afford to live in. I don't understand how that's fair. They pushed for the morning after pill, easy access to unsafe abortions outside of hospitals. I don't know if everybody remembers this, but also pre-COVID in my home state of Oklahoma, and then the other state that we have to acknowledge because it's, just south of us, Texas. The left and Planned Parenthood fought legislation that abortions had to occur either in a place with a surgeon present, so surgical facility, or within something like a 5-mile drive to an emergency room. Once again, I had pro-abortion friends that were for that. They're like, well, if it decreases the risk to the mother, yeah. But no. Once again, the lie was told. That was anti-women. If women mattered to the anti-life crowd, they'd actually hold men accountable for their actions in the co-creation and upbringing of those children. Right? They expect men to pay for the abortion, but they don't hold them accountable for sticking around and paying child support. Last year at the Live Action Gala, I actually met the Attorney General of the state of Mississippi, whose team took the Dobbs case to the Supreme Court, and Lynn Fitch. And she's incredible, not only because the majority of her office is hardworking moms who are brilliant legal minds, but that she said, I want to be pro-life the whole life, and I want to use the local government to just enforce the laws on the books that are supposed to hold deadbeat dads accountable. Why don't we see the anti-life movement supporting that? If women mattered to them, private companies that claim to be yes, all women would offer paid maternity pay and maybe even paternity leave, right? They'd recognize, if they were really pro-woman, that my greatest equalizer to protect myself is a gun. They'd support the aforementioned school choice. They would limit the government from punishing women who are the largest starters and owners of small businesses in the nation. And by the way, my mom is a very successful small business owner. She has 120 employees. Did you know that small business, the definition of small business, is actually 150 employees or less? I would assume, anything over 50, I'm like, that's hard to remember people's names. Once you get past the hard to remember their names number, it seems like a medium to large business to me. Nope. Biggest starters and owners of small businesses that are the backbone of the American economy, women. Don't see them supporting that. Don't see them inhibiting legislation and taxation on those women, right? If they cared about women, they'd address the actual systemic problems that exist in modern medicine. including how I think until about 100 years ago, the medical community only researched the male body because they thought that we were the same. No. Did you know that for every study about women's reproductive health, or now we're slowly learning more about the effects of premenopause and menopause on women's bodies? For every study about that, there's 10 times more about erectile dysfunction. And for leftists who are the heads of academic regimes, because they are regimes, around the country and medical communities, why aren't they pushing for more studies about women's health and women's reproduction, women's issues? If they cared about women, they'd support informed consent for everything from birth control to a vaccine that we now know dramatically hurt women of a reproductive age. And that's not me saying that. That's like Vox and Axios and Huffington Post saying that. If they truly supported women, they'd support any woman attempting to be the first female president of the United States, whether it was Nikki Haley or, their favorite, Hillary Clinton. But they don't, because I think y'all get the point I'm getting to. They don't truly care about women. Instead, they portray motherhood as something that diminishes a woman's full potential. They portray us as ragged and tired and dumb and ditzy of taking orders from our men and being barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen, right? Whether it's rom-coms, blockbuster films. Can you think of a movie that portrayed a strong mother? Nope. And there's a constant hypocrisy, I think, in society that I always love to point out, that when one of the Kar-Jenners or even the royal family are celebrated whenever they announce that a baby's coming, right? Rihanna's baby celebrated. Single mom in Compton must terminate. Kate and William's baby celebrated. Working mom in South Florida. She now we need to figure out how to get her across state lines to, take care of that problem. The left loves to praise the likes of Michelle Williams, who she has 2 daughters, by the way, who when accepting her Golden Globe in 2020 said that she would not be up on that stage unless she had had the abortion that she had early in her career. Who said that she thought that the only reason she was up there and the only reason she could succeed in Hollywood was the one where she had the choice to end that pregnancy. And that's a really sick world that we live in, if that's the lie that we're perpetuating to women. That in order to have a career, in order to gain fame, in order to gain success and awards, that you have to end the innocent life of a human being. And the truth is that they don't. And the left often, loves to praise one side and the other. And be like, well, Chrissy Teigen, she chose to have that baby, so it should be celebrated, right? And I think that they're jumping more to telling numerous lies, some of which I've laid out today, because they're recognizing that they're losing the medical, legal, and moral battle regarding abortion. Because of the science. Thank God for the science that exists. You don't need the Psalms to point out the sanctity of life. I got a blood test at 8 weeks that told me the sex of my baby. 8 weeks. The Liberal Guttmacher Institute says that abortions that are limited before 15 weeks in states around the country are restrictive. But I wonder how many women would view it as restrictive if they could actually get that blood test and be like, oh, it's a boy or a girl? It's not a blob. It's a human being. But they want to dilute and muddy the facts because they know they cannot win them. And how can they claim to support and empower women when they won't even share with us the truths of what's happening inside of their bodies? And there's many examples of strong women who've debunked their lies of lack of success. And I mean, if your measure of success is fame or fortune, then I'll go through a few, but I don't think that that should necessarily be the measure, right? Margaret Thatcher, a mother. The aforementioned Rihanna. Beyonce, whose daughters now appear in her shows. Serena Williams, who, by the way, highlights the plight of Black women in the medical community and when it comes to labor and delivery in the country, who doctors ignored when she was like, there's something going on with me. Hey guys, I think there's something going on with me. They're gonna ignore Serena Williams until her husband, who founded Reddit and is a bajillionaire, walks in and threatens to sue. You think they're paying attention to the average mom from Chicago? Amy Coney Barrett. Some of you might be familiar with Diane Hendricks from just a couple states over. She's one of the only female self-made billionaires in the United States. At 17, she was working in a factory line to support her newborn son. And at 21, she met and married her husband, Ken, and they built the nation's largest roofing, window, and siding wholesale distribution company in the country. J.K. Rowling, once a darling of the left and now hated by them. There's actually a really great podcast out right now about the witch trials of J.K. Rowling. I'd encourage you to listen to. Still one of the world's most successful writers, who went by the name J.K. because her publisher was like, in like magical sci-fi books, nobody's going to read a woman, so maybe we should like abbreviate your name, right? And she was actually, she should still be a feminist icon, whether you like the books or not. Because she was in an abusive relationship, and soon after having her baby, her husband was holding hostage her manuscript for Harry Potter because he knew she wanted to leave him. And he threatened to burn it, and he locked it away. But she was able to get it and would take pieces of the manuscript, just a little bit at a time, so he wouldn't notice, to work. This is the early 90s. There's some too young in the room to know what a photocopier is. And she would photocopy pieces of the manuscript until she had the entire thing. And she packed up her daughter and left. The most successful female author in the world is a mother. Kathy McMorris Rogers, highest ranking woman in the GOP, got married later in life. Specifically said, I married a man later in life who would support me in my professional and my political aspirations and goals to serve my state. Nobody puts her on the cover of Vogue. I could go on. But the point I'm getting to is that for women, your life isn't over. You're not a failure the moment you become a mother. And when the left says that to women, they're not empowering them. And it's fascinating to me that they claim to be the side that represents empathy and compassion, loving kindness, while literally putting a boot on women and their goals and what they can achieve. Well, they condone the killing of the disabled, the girls. There's more girls aborted, even though sex-selective abortion is illegal. More girls are aborted in the world than there are boys. When they make the argument of like, oh, deformity, its life would be really hard. Sound familiar? When they refuse to provide that informed consent. When they send out emails on International Women's Day with discount codes, and talking about supporting the trans movement and the Women's March, but, not giving women equal pay for equal work or maternity leave. When they're more willing to send out an email saying, hey, we'll pay to fly you across state lines. What they're saying to you is, your medical choice should be ours, not yours. We don't value your choice as a woman. This is the choice we will pay for. This is the choice you are given. But I believe, and don't mean to be abysmal this evening, that there is hope. The signs that I mentioned and the truth. That women are slowly questioning and also realizing that they are enough. They're recognizing that there's beauty in their ability to co-create, grow, and sustain life. And I have met and know and love many who regret with so much regret, listening to the lies that were told to them to put off having a family. That abortion will do nothing. It's like birth control, it's fine. That told them to pursue college, a career, or waiting till later in life to find a man. Or even the lies of, you don't need a man. Freeze your eggs, do it later. And they're recognizing the physical and emotional damage of using that birth control or using abortion like birth control, which many women in my generation did. And they want the truth out there. And I hope that all of us in this room can continue to help them on that journey with truth, love, and compassion. Because I believe that we can empower women by reminding them that there is strength in being a woman. And it helps if you're strong and smart too. Thanks so much.
All right, we will now take questions. Please raise your hand and wait until we bring you a mic so that your question can be heard.
I side hustle as a doula. I'm a home birth hippie. I live in LA. Like to surf when I don't have a baby belly. I mean, y'all can ask me about anything. It doesn't have to be very specific to this topic, but. Or you can turn around and enjoy your dessert. I don't know.
Well, I'll ask an off-topic question, which is somebody like you who's lived in media as long as you have. I'm curious, so much of what I see in media on either side seems to be aimed at the echo chamber, telling you what you want to hear kind of thing. Can you give us any idea as to where to track to actually get news? I mean, reality?
You are 1,000% accurate. It is clickbait and money on both sides. And it's like that team. You know, it's like rah rah, lie, distortion, extremist title. I love it when people just read the headline and not the actual article. And unfortunately, I don't know a place that you can go to narrow that down. I tend to listen to, because I'm more of an audible learner, I've learned about myself, and read kind of both sides, and then dissecting or just skimming down, which often at the New York Times or even Breitbart and other places tends to be like fourth or fifth paragraph down, like well, where's the actual quote of the study or the poll or the data or what did the politician actually say? Where's the unedited video clip of said person, whether it's Dianne Feinstein or Rand Paul, you know, that I want to see, and having to do a little extra work to seek that out. So it's carving out more time in your day to like read both sides and then seeing the parallels of like what facts and data were true without the opinion, and then deciphering for yourself, you know, what you do and do not believe. And something that's fascinating to me is women are also the largest consumers of media in the country and tend to consume left, right, and center like mainstream media because they are turned off by the extremes on both sides. Even right-leaning women are increasingly, specifically millennials and the younger generation, are increasingly going to social or other outlets, or trying to find like other outlets that because they don't want that conservative or liberal echo chamber. And I think that some of that has to do with the messaging and the messengers, and that simply people on the right haven't tried it different, because it's kind of this mentality of like, well, if we're number one and it ain't broke, we're not going to fix it. But I think in addition to women in the country, or the largest voting bloc, and small businesses and media consumers, there's a void and an opportunity there. Not, so that's a sidebar. Hi, ma'am.
Hi, if I could just comment to what you said. I wouldn't consider them news outlets at all, but I do think it's really helpful if anyone's familiar in the room with like Trinity Forum or Faith in Law. They're out of DC, but they, like each Friday, they have speakers. Paul McNulty, who's the president of Grove City, helped to start Faith in Law. They have excellent speakers who come in and talk from a Christian's perspective about a lot of these things, and it's really informative. There's also, you can get emails from a place, Public Discourse, that I think they're, much more thoughtful and not as inflammatory sometimes. So I don't know if that helps.
There's a couple of like email lists too that are more mainstream. Like there's the 1440, and then there's another one that I sign up for, and they tend to just take a topic a day. So like today's, it's like might even be left, right, and center, and it's like today's topic was the Pentagon leaker, and so it was like the left and right agree on blah blah blah, and so then it'll have excerpts with links to what Jim Garrity at NRO said versus what somebody at Young Turks said. And so I kind of like that that's condensed. I wish they would expand to like more breaking news topics instead of just one a day, but that's a big task. Did you have a question though? No. Okay.
Is
Yeah, Real Clear Politics is another one. And I'm like, it is time consuming. We don't listen to politics or discuss it around our children. I mean, it inevitably comes up because of how we're raising them, right? And then, driving down the 405 in LA and my 10-year-old's like, why is that person under the bridge? Like, well, there's a Red Hot Chili Pepper song about that. And so it's kind of, I'm limited in my time, but I often try to like, if I'm listening to Liz Wheeler, then I'm going to listen to the New York Times, The Daily. If I'm listening to Ben, I'm doing NPR up first and maybe a couple other things that's thrown in there. But there are some, I would suggest looking and signing up for like email lists because then it's kind of condensed in there. Yes, sir.
is there any truth to the rumor that having a trad wife is the new status symbol? And also related to that, if you noticed any differentiation and generational differentiation in the acceptance by men of having a wife and appreciating a wife in a trad role.
Yeah, so with the trad wife thing, I am not hip enough to be completely up on it, but I actually take issue with some of the internet celebrities that are pushing that because they're just asshole dudes. They're jerks. They're not looking for a Proverbs 31 woman. They're looking for a Handmaid's Tale woman, which I think is sad because it is distorting the positivity of the traditional woman that you see or traditional wife roles that you see, I think, in the pro-life or conservative or Christian or Catholic, Mormon, like tons of influencers that are like, hey, I'm a mom, I love being a mom, and buy my candles. You know what I mean? Because I say all the time, I couldn't do what I do without my supportive husband who's at home with the other 3 kids right now. And so, unfortunately, as there was this rise of like the hashtag trad wife kind of like happening in a positive way, some of the anti-women, alt-righty types who've never been out of their mom's basement took it to the other extreme. So I don't know if I can like totally answer that question. But to the second part of your question of like, are men more interested in that? I do think so. And it is fascinating to see specifically like in Los Angeles, where I'm like a young mom compared to a lot of my peers, right? And how even secularists that I know are recognizing the dangers of not just hookup culture, but also porn and the negative effects that it has on men and their ability to perform or have meaningful relationships in and outside of the bedroom. And it's been fascinating to see that. And I'm very pro them kind of recognizing that and using the data and the studies to back that up. When I worked at PragerU, I think I could double check with Dennis and Marissa, but like, I know when I was there, the video that gave us the most backlash, and it still might be the video that gives them the most backlash, was from this kind of normal, dull professor that just laid out the data that men who get married live longer, make more money, and have more sex. And the majority of the hatred wasn't from women, it was from single men that were enraged that we did a 5-minute video on this fact. And I think that was maybe 4 years ago now, and I'm grateful to see that there's still popularity in that video. The data still stands, and that I do think that there is a cultural shift that's recognizing, oh wait, like men and women can complement each other. There's benefits to the nuclear family, not just for your own personal well-being, but for that of society. So sorry, I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
When Betty Friedan wrote The Feminine Mystique in 1963, she opened up some questions that were probably positive in terms of opportunities for women, but really seemed to trash motherhood, and then later backtrack some of that years later. Why does there seem to be why is that not more commonly talked about? Or Helen Gurley Brown, Sex and the Single Girl. There's not much backlash as saying of the consequence. That's just like sort of hidden. Is there any comments about it?
They love to use old facts and straight up lies to discourage women from being our true and fullest selves. Seriously, because it doesn't benefit their argument. And I often say, and I do disagree with some of my conservative counterparts, I identify as a feminist because I believe that words matter and definitions matter. And the dictionary definition of a feminist is someone who believes in the equality of men and women. And that's what I am. I think that's what most small government-minded conservatives are. I think if you look at Christianity and Judaism, that there's those examples there as well, right? What other faiths have powerful and strong women that served a savior and washed his feet and spread the news that he had risen? Like, I mean, there's so many examples in faith. There's so many examples in history of powerful women, and they don't want to highlight those. They don't want to highlight the women that were enlightened and educated enough to be like, you know what? I said something about motherhood and I now regret it. They want to shout your abortion, but they never talk to the post-abortive woman that has regret. That every single year doesn't remember the day she aborted her baby, but remembers the day that that baby was supposed to be born. Because that's what they do. Is they fill you with confusion and deceit. And that's why I think we have to compassionately continue to share the truth. I hope that.
One more question.
Okay.
Thank you again. That's brilliant talk.
Thank you.
We haven't talked about this a lot during the conference because it wasn't the focus, but in addition to everything else that is picking away at the value of the traditional family, there is what's going on in early childhood education, where there is a lot of nodding in the direction of developing relationships with families, but then taking the focus off of the traditional family of a mother and a father and saying, well, all these other things can be families too. And then, these things do happen, all right, fine. But on the other side, the most important relationship that's talked about, the relationship that is emphasized, is the relationship between a child and a teacher or a caregiver, almost to the exclusion of the family.
It's not almost to, it's actually in curriculum, preschool curriculum in places like Oregon.
Yeah.
And has been for 5 years.
And I mean, that's something, I talk to people all the time and say, you have to watch out for this. They don't realize that there are people in these schools actively trying to undermine what the parents are teaching their children. I mean, you highlighted about 14-year-old girls being able to get birth control. In some states, it's as young as 11 or 12 that they can do medical procedures that if you were in a hospital, you'd have to have your parents sign a consent form. it's really shocking. And I just ask everybody to pay attention to what's going on in your communities, because once those children are taken away, it's really, really hard to get them back. And I mean, we see this all the time with, the children and
Well, parental rights,
transgender and so on.
parental rights matter, and I think protecting the innocence of children matters. And I think that this is a battle that we can and will win, because once again, it's a bipartisan issue. When even my most liberal friends are like, why do I need to know how the librarian identifies on a Zoom meeting in a parent-teacher conference? Just like, why I don't need to know, like, your pronouns. I'm paying you $30,000 a year to teach my kid, so teach my kid. And when you have leftists in LA saying that there's hope for the nation, when you have like rich Malibu moms that are anti-vaccine and like, oh, no, we're not giving our kid the COVID vaccine, or you're not going to require, recently the Democratic supermajority in California wanted to require the HPV vaccine for high schoolers. They lost. So many pissed off parents called that they removed the COVID vaccine requirement and the HPV vaccine requirement. And that ain't registered Republicans in the state, right? So I think that, and speaking of living in a liberal state, I often get asked, like, how is it in LA? Why do you stay there? Like, why didn't you go to Florida? Dave Rubin. No, I love Dave. I was born in Miami. I'll probably die there. It's a great city. And the reason why is because you look at places that are ground zero. Jerry Brown, our 4-time infamous governor, once said, as goes California, so goes the nation. And he's right. Because whether it's a Republican or a Democrat in the White House, or a left or a right majority in the Senate and Congress, or there's happened to be 5 conservatives on the Supreme Court or not, what happens in California, culturally and politically, trickles down to the rest of the nation. Because I have friends in Dallas-Fort Worth that are dealing with the issue that you're talking about. I have friends out in the suburbs of Chicago, Illinois, that are dealing with the issues that you're talking about. In Montana, that are dealing with the issues that you're talking about. So it's not a red versus blue state thing. You have to be aware. You have to stand up and fight where you live. And then you have to support the others that are doing it too. So, thank you for your question.
Thank you, Elisha, very much. And speaking of strong, sweet, and smart, and how strong, sweet, and smart is it that we finished this conference with a mom who's 7 months pregnant? And I got to tell you, we didn't plan it that way. Right? So Robert and I were talking about, Dave Tepley and I were talking about how providentially these conferences tend to shake out, and you can't imagine how much so. In fact, Elisha was supposed to come here about 1.5 years ago, right? And she got stranded in Pittsburgh during that horrific freezing rainstorm that was so bad that we couldn't even get anybody to drive her up here from Pittsburgh. And so we rescheduled for now, when she's here and 7 months pregnant, to wrap up our conference. So I mean, it's just perfect. You can't make that up. And I was thinking too, I was going through some of the numbers here in my head. So you have 3 girls, right? And this is a boy on the way. You're 37, all right? Okay, so we have, my wife and I, by the way, she's pretty trad, all right? And she has a master's in exercise physiology and teaches kickboxing, all right? So, but we have, so when she was 37, we have 8 kids now. So when she was 37, she had number 4, Abigail, who's waiting outside, who's a freshman here at Grove City College. And then the others came after that. So I think the last one she had at age 42. Right. So you've got 5 years there to equal us on this, but and you wonder if we had 5 kids from 37 to 42. I mean, that's pretty impressive even for a couple of natural family planning Catholics. But we adopted 2. We adopted 2. And so that gets to another point. And I was waiting for someone to make this point the whole conference, so I'm so glad that you did. And you hear from the left and pro-choicers all the time, what do you pro-lifers do with a child after it's born? I mean, you only care about abortion and you don't do anything after that. And it's not true. Like Elisha said, I mean, most of the adoptions are done by Christian parents. I mean, that's who's doing most of it. And it's not the secular millennial in LA or Manhattan or wherever who aren't having kids at all and don't adopt either. I don't know if I should mention this. It's kind of a sad image. I'll try to think of a more positive one before we close. But my children have been to, and I know Grove City College students who pray outside the abortion clinic in Pittsburgh. And the most horrifying sight are not just the women that go in and are devastated, but the abortion escorts. And some of you know who these people are. Exactly. One of them was our governor of Pennsylvania, Tom Wolf. We elected the only Planned Parenthood escort in the history of the governorship. And that's Robert Casey, the late great pro-life Democrat, Robert Casey, Planned Parenthood v. Casey. That's his state. That's his party. But they talk about how these escorts do everything to bring the woman in, right, to bring her in. And these women, a lot of them are scared. And they keep them away from the people praying and offering other solutions, and they do everything to get them inside. And then when the abortion is over, the escorts are gone. These girls, many of them, most of them, African American, are practically crawling to their cars, right, just wiped out. And at that point, it's the pro-lifers who step up and offer them brochures and counseling, and the pro-choicers are gone. And if those women, the pro-lifers, are not just there to help the woman post-abortive, but if she would have had the child, would have helped too. That's what crisis pregnancy centers do, and they're also there to adopt the children as well. So I'm so glad that you mentioned that. By the way, I was thinking of other women that the left don't talk about. Sarah Palin. I mean, look at Sarah Palin in 2008. You got Barack Obama standing up there. He was an Illinois state senator who refused to support a statewide infant born alive act, right, protection act, and who said that does life begin at conception? That's above my pay grade. And here's Sarah Palin, 2008. And by the way, she's running with John McCain, whose wife went to Mother Teresa's orphanage in Calcutta and brought home a baby girl. Said, John, can we adopt this? And he said, yes. And there's Sarah Palin, who's governor of Alaska. She has everything. She's doing all these things, and she should be the ideal of what the left would like. But they destroyed her. They destroyed her. All right. Well, I said I'll try to end on a positive note here. So, Robert and I were talking about how takeaways from this conference, and one theme that came up is that pro-lifers, no matter what happens legally and post-Roe, and no matter what legislative victories you have, it's still up to each and every person individually to change hearts and minds. And Michael Medved said today that the good news is that the number of abortions in the country are down. I mean, at one point at the height of post-Roe, there were almost 2 million abortions per year. And now it's been under 1 million for a few years. We have 330 million people in the country. So the percentage overall is down. Now, the problem is what? That a lot of them are chemical and people are doing them at home today. So that's unfortunate. But I think what we have to do is we have to change hearts and minds. So walk the pro-life walk and live the pro-life life. And so to that end, for this conference, go to our website. When do you think we'll have these posted? Probably in the next couple weeks. All right. So that's our challenge to you guys, the tech guys. But so take what you've gotten here, not just the knowledge for your own mind, But go to our website and get these talks, get the links, and send them out to people. We'll send them out as videos in the next few weeks. Get the talk by last night by Abby Johnson. Wasn't it amazing? Yes. It really was amazing. The abortion tourism talk by Ann Hendershot and Lucia. Catherine Jean Lopez, the Alexandra DeSanctis, Elisha's closing talk. So get these and send them out to people and start changing hearts and minds. All right, and thank you all very much for coming. So God bless.